Got a lot on my mind.
Welcome back to another episode of Four Wide. Jonathan's ready to go, so we're ready to go here. As always,
No
Jeremiah
warning.
Snyder, Jonathan Williams, and Dan Kiley, we are ready to get after it. It is another week of the NFL, week 9. It has been a pretty crazy one going on so far. We just watched the game end with LA, the Rams, and Tampa Bay as Tom Brady was able to cross the 100,000-yard passing record or achievement for the first player to ever do that. He just did that as the game was winding down and then led them down the field for a last second touchdown to win that game over the Rams and Matthew Stafford as well. But there was a lot of close games and things to talk about in there as well. So we're just going to jump straight into it before we get into, predictions for tonight and everything like that. We'll make sure you are well caught up and ready to go before tonight and tomorrow. So Dan, you mentioned the game before we came on live, so I'm going to start with that one on there as well. Go ahead and kick us off.
So one of the games that I was watching in that early window was the Dolphins and the Bears, and for fair or not, Justin Fields has been catching a ton of strays from the media about his passing ability, but he said, "I don't got to throw the ball. I can run it against this Dolphins defense to the tune of 178 yards on 15 carries." And I'll let you say what you said about the clip, but my goodness, 178 yards broke Michael Vick's single game record of rushing yards in the game. That's incredible. Well, when we think of Justin Fields, we know that he has a strong enough arm to throw it. We sometimes critique or criticize his ability to properly read a defense and get the ball where it's supposed to be. And as far as the running ability, I think the general consensus, at least I think among us, was that he was mobile. And he could get out and buy time and get out of pressure and extend a play, get a first down if he has to. I don't know that, at least I'm going to speak for myself here. I don't know that I saw 178 yards worth of rushing out of Justin Fields. I never saw that coming. But the good thing is he's big, he's durable, and he, for the most part, he doesn't take the big shots that you don't want your quarterback to take. But the Dolphins hold on, win that football game. 6-3 on the season for the Dolphins. One of the feel-good stories this year, had Tua not gotten hurt the way that he did, I wonder what their record would be. Overall, a really entertaining game. I enjoyed it very much so, and I did not think that was going to be the case. I think in one of my leagues, I picked up the Dolphins defense because I thought the Bears were trash. So, again, I am the ultimate mush when it comes to fantasy football. If you're playing me, you're going to have a career day, and if I pick you, I am so sorry.
So the comment that you were talking about a second ago with Mike McDaniels, there's a clip of as soon as Justin Fields ran out of bounds and right to the Dolphins bench and right next to Mike McDaniels, and you can see he's saying something to him, and then you see him turn around as Fields is walking by him, so the camera actually can see his face, and he just literally goes, "Stop it!" And it was hilarious. I started busting out laughing because he was telling him to stop scrambling on him because it wasn't designed runs, a bunch of those. It was after, like you said, he was extending plays, and he was out there just going, and it just literally put them in a really bad spot. But he didn't throw for a lot today. He still only threw for 123 yards. He did have 3 touchdowns, so overall it was a good game for him. No interceptions or anything like that, so he didn't have a bad passing day. He just didn't throw for a whole lot of yards. A lot of that's because he ran for 170 something yards. So you don't have to throw it that much when you can run that much on there, and you stick with what's working for you at that point. But Tua, once again, having another really good game, another 300-yard game for him and 3 touchdowns. Since he's been healthy, I think there was a stat last week afterwards. I think he's now 6-0 in games that he's not dead, or half dead because he got thrown into the ground. He's 6-0 at this point because
you mean to tell me that protecting your quarterback wins you football games? Is that what you're telling me?
Or just don't let him have his brain just completely
breaking news from Jeremiah
in
Stoddard. Protect your quarterback. You might win some football games.
6-0 at this point. Now
Ask
in
Tennessee
those games that he hasn't had any issues. Yeah, protecting your quarterback is pretty important. Georgia got after Hendon Hooker last night, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. But anyways, yeah. So Tua had yeah. Jonathan, shush. Okay, stay on topic here. But Tua had another really good day, and it just kind of solidifies his ability to continuously dice up these NFL defenses. And like you said, the Bears that don't have the best defense in the world, but they're not terrible. But he definitely looked pretty good today. So it's interesting to see now that he's coming out of his injury stuff, how he's going to look down the stretch, if he's going to be able to run for an MVP type season I think he's got a pretty good chance at this point.
You know, the one thing that I was going to say is that Justin Fields finally found his safety valve in Cole Kmet. I mean, the Bears drafted, I think it was 3 tight ends or 3 or 4 tight ends in a 2-year stretch, and they were catching a lot of hell. And it was kind of like the Dan Reeves throwback where he drafts tight ends every single year. But Cole Kmet is a legit top of the line tight end, and they don't use him. And granted, 5 catches, 41 yards, and 2 touchdowns a day for him. But in the red zone and short yardage, Cole Kmet should be on the front side of Justin Fields' mind as somebody to check down to. It was good to see that today. And if he continues to do that, I think it's going to be beneficial for him long term. I'm sorry to cut you off, John.
Oh, no. You're good. I was just going to talk about the Jacksonville and the Las Vegas Raiders. I always want to call them Oakland, but, you know, they're in Las Vegas now. I don't want to talk about that game because for 2 reasons. One, again, we bring up the Raiders pretty consistently on this channel, and it's because we have said we feel like this team is a lot better than what their record shows, and it happened again today. They're 2-6 on the season. This is a talented roster. At least I feel like they are, but they just haven't figured out how to win. And so they're 2-6. They were up 17-0 in this game. Devontae Adams was cooking Jacksonville's
Those 2
defense.
early touchdowns for him. Yeah, he looked
He
good.
was. I mean, I checked fantasy, and he had like 22 points within the first hour of that football game. So he was absolutely lighting it up offensively. And you want to know who ended up making adjustments and who ended up shutting him down in the second half? It was Tyson Campbell, former Bulldog, ended up locking him down. You know, I think Devontae had 6 or 7 receptions in the first half, and then you never heard his name in the second half. You did not hear Devontae Adams' name called a single time in the second half on the game cast because he wasn't getting the ball anymore. And so they interviewed Tyson, of course, after the game and just kind of talked about it. And Tyson basically said, like, you know, we go against a lot of good football players in the NFL. Well, no duh. It's professional football. He's like, they're going to get you. They're going to get you at some point, but you just got to make sure you give those punches back. And that's exactly what he did. Tyson Campbell has been having a great season in the NFL. I know last year people were kind of speculating about him, whether or not that was a wasted draft pick. He was hurt a little bit last year and didn't really show up that much, but this year he's having a huge season for them. In fact, I think he's one of the top-rated corners for the season this year. He's having a heck of a year. So shouts out to the Dogs, shouts out to Tyson Campbell, and another good win for Jacksonville and another bad loss for Las Vegas.
Yeah, Jacksonville's trying to climb back up themselves. They were sitting at 2-6 prior to this game. They got up to 3-6, so they're trying to crawl back out of the depths of a rough start to a season for themselves as well. But going back to LA, yeah, I think Devontae Adams ended with 10 receptions, 146 yards, and those 2 touchdowns. Like you said, though, the majority of all of that came in that first half, and so he only had 2 or 3 catches in the second half of that game. So he didn't contribute the same way anymore, and they've really just kind of forced the Vegas to adjust their game plan, and they weren't able to do it on the fly in the second half, and they weren't able to keep it going. But part of the issue comes back to, this is something we've talked about multiple times on this show. If you cannot run the ball in the NFL, you are going to struggle. And they only had 73 yards of rushing, and most of that came from Josh Jacobs at 67 yards.
Well, Josh Jacobs had a massive week. Was it last week or the week before? Couldn't replicate that against this Jacksonville defense. And on the flip side of that, Travis Etienne, finally healthy, finally starting to run the ball for Jacksonville. He's a great find. Find's probably not the right word. I mean, everyone knew what they had when they drafted him. Yeah, but he's finally starting to get a play. But Trevor Lawrence, I wanted to talk about him for a second. And when we saw him in high school here in Cartersville, I got to see a bunch of his high school games. And, I mean, my gosh, did he look good. Went to Clemson, took Kelly Bryant's job, and was unbelievable while I was at Clemson. What has happened to him in the NFL? Now, I think we chalked some of that up last year, his rookie year with Urban Meyer and that shit show that they had going on down there last year. But with Peterson coming in, who, a lot of people want to say he's a quarterback's coach, right? A quarterback-friendly coach. Thought that would rebound, but he is so inconsistent. And for somebody with his talent, I don't understand why he cannot translate the skill set that everybody knows that he has to Sundays. And this isn't the first time ever this has ever happened. I remember, and you guys probably don't know who this is, but Brady Quinn, when he was at Notre Dame, was one of the best looking quarterbacks I'd ever seen. and Notre Dame used him in such a way that he could throw, and he went to the Browns and didn't do a darn thing. And then, I mean, there's other quarterbacks too. I could name a bunch of them, but to me, Trevor Lawrence is about as disappointing to me anyway so far as that Brady Quinn was. I really thought Brady Quinn was going to be the real deal in the NFL. He turned out not to be. I didn't think there was, within a shadow of a doubt, I didn't think there was any way that Trevor Lawrence wasn't going to be a Hall of Fame NFL quarterback.
Well,
and he still might be, but gosh.
It's funny you say that, because if you go back to his freshman year at Clemson, he takes over the starting quarterback job, leads Clemson to a national title that year. People were saying he could go in the league right now and tear it up. Like, if he were to declare right now, he'd be the number 1 overall pick, kind of like what people are doing with Brock Bowers at Georgia right now. Everybody said that man could declare this year and he'd be a top 10 draft pick. And so you kind of got, I think people don't kind of forget about how much of a step up it is to go to the NFL versus what you're playing in college, especially the ACC. Like, no disrespect to them, but come on, guys. Like, there's not a bunch of Sunday football players on every single football team in the ACC. So, you're talking about at every single position, you got a professional football player at every single secondary spot, every single linebacker spot, whatever. So that's a big step up compared to what you were going against in college. So, that might be kind of what's translating to some of these early struggles for him. And I think it happens to a lot of quarterbacks and just a lot of players in general.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's definitely going to be a tough little stretch coming up for them as well. I think the next 2 games they have is Kansas City and then the Ravens. So back-to-back weeks of really, really good opponents. So we'll see how they end up kind of turning that around the rest of the way. After that, they get a couple of easier games, I believe, too. But we'll see how they end up doing. Earlier in the season, they lost to the Texans. I think at low scoring, it was like 13-6 or something like that to the Texans. Those are the games that you cannot lose, and you can't put up bad performances like that. But another game that we got to talk about that was a pretty rough one if you are a Falcons fan is the Falcons game. Falcons 17-20 versus the Chargers today, and that was just a weird game, and the Falcons seemed to be in a lot of weird games. It was one that they had the opportunity to pull through and win. They started strong. Defense was looking good pretty early. Defense looked good for the most part of the entire game, to be honest with you. They really didn't have a whole bunch of busted coverages or anything like that, even though there's a lot of depletion in that secondary for the Falcons. But offensively, they started strong, scored 10 points in the first, and were moving the ball effectively, running the ball effectively, and all of a sudden they stopped. And all of a sudden, everything shifted. They got away from that run game in the second quarter. It kind of slowed them down. Cordell Patterson came back this week and scored early and was involved heavily in the offense right there, which is good to see that run game start to pick back up for him. But, I mean, Dan, how are you feeling about this Falcons team after this week? I'm not going back and saying they're bad all of a sudden, because I don't think that's the case. They're better than we all expected them to be. But what can we still find out about this Falcons team as we move forward?
Well, I think this is probably one of the first games. Well, not the first, because the first game, Marcus Mariota lost us that game because he couldn't hold on to the football, right? Fumbling snaps. You can't do that. But in this game, he had open wide receivers. He had Kyle Pitts on one, and he had Drake London on another. Those were completable balls. I understand when you miss and you're being flushed out of the pocket, or you're being chased down, or you got heavy pressure. I get that. I can concede that can happen. But when you have a relatively clean pocket, or you have time to set your feet and throw, you cannot miss open receivers like that. And I think that's a big deal. Zach Moss in our comments put up, why didn't we run the ball? And I think that's a theme that we're going to touch on multiple times in multiple games, is that the running game has disappeared. Teams are not committed to
run it.
Run the ball. But listen, there's a bunch of teams that are not running the football. Cordell Patterson, I understand. I mean, he had 13 carries today. That's probably more than I thought he was going to get. I thought they might break him in slowly, which kind of tells you that maybe he was healthier a little bit earlier, but because they put him on that was 6-week IR or whatever he was on, you have to, it is what it is. You got to ride it out. But this is a much different football team when Cordell Patterson is healthy and able to play. And who would have ever thought that 2 years ago when we got him, or the year before last when we got him? Because in Minnesota and the other places that he was at, he just, they were trying to use it's just square peg round hole, right? Just never was a right fit, never could figure it out. They came down here. You got to give Arthur Smith a ton of credit for being creative on the ways that they used him. I mean, he is a legit running back now, right? And he was a wide receiver. They could still split him out in the slot and let him run some routes out there. And obviously he's going to catch the ball. He's got good hands. But again, Cordell Patterson is the most important piece on this offense. I think we are at the point of the season now where Marcus Mariota is starting to affect our ability to win. And I hate to say that. I was kind of riding with him for a little bit, hoping that maybe he was able to turn it around. But I think it's that time where we got to see Ridder just to see what he has, even if it's just a couple packages a game. And I know people hate that, but just a couple packages a game just to see if he can even compete at this level, because you have to know at the end of this season what you have and what you don't have at quarterback position. And to your point about are they good again? Are they bad again? I think you have to give a tremendous amount of credit to the coaching staff, Arthur Smith, Dean Pease, especially keeping this team in the game. They do not have the talent to compete with these other teams, but yet somehow they are. And I think that's coaching all the way.
You know what? So you talking about Marcus Mariota and kind of like we want to give Desmond Ridder a shot, whatever. We kind of got into that, I believe it was last week, about when is the perfect time to get Desmond Ridder's feet wet in the league. And I'll go ahead and say right now, at least for now, like I think the Falcons are going to be with Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder for next year as well, because I was having a conversation with this about someone else the other day is I'm not exactly in love with this year's quarterback class in the draft. Right. I'm not. You know, people were super high on this class because of two people, C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. That's all you got, really. There was this random Will Levis hype that he might potentially be a first-round draft pick. Holy crap. Has that burned to pieces? Just absolutely fizzled out.
Like last week before they lost to Tennessee, not only did they have him as a first-round pick, they had him as the second quarterback off the board. And like in the top 5 or 6 picks or something like that. It was ridiculous. Yeah, for sure. Well, and the thing, like what you're getting at too, is the Falcons have basically passed the point of saying they're going to get a top 5 pick or something like that. Like, right. Like they're just under 500 on the season. They can win some of these games. They have very winnable games on their schedule at this point that before the season started, we didn't necessarily think they could, but now they are very much winnable games after we got to see what they can do. And so you're not going to be in the contention for one of those two quarterbacks, the CJ Stroud or the Bryce Young type lottery system, I will say, unless you trade up to a higher pick. And yeah, I'm with you. I'm okay with that as well as waiting another year and seeing what you got. But even if that's who you wanted, you've kind of passed the point of being able to get it. But here's the question that I'm going to ask both of y'all, because we sit here and we talk about, you know, it being Ridder needing the chance to play and stuff like that. This is what I've always told Georgia fans and stuff when we talked about this as well, is do we know that he's processing the packages, and he's processing stuff to be able to go onto the field and succeed? Or are they holding him out because they don't want to put him out there? Because what you don't want to do is put a young quarterback out there and let him just get destroyed and look terrible and have really bad performances, because that depletes his confidence and puts him in a bad spot for his career moving forward. That's what you got to think about as well. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't give him a chance. I'm just saying that that's the question that I have, is what's going on in the locker room behind closed doors. Where is he at mentally, and how is he prepared for that potential spot?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, we can't answer that question. I think it is kind of telling that maybe the fact that you haven't seen him at all yet this season. Now, a lot of that also has to do with the fact that there is no such thing as a drama-free Falcons game. And so you're not going to pull Marcus Mariota out of the game and put in Desmond Ridder and smack in the middle of a beatdown or like a fight to the death, whatever you want to call it, like a close game coming down to it in the end of the fourth quarter. But I don't know. I think it's a weird situation, but I also know that you don't take Desmond Ridder in the draft if you don't have intentions of playing him eventually, at least giving him a shot eventually. And you know what? Maybe that isn't this season. Maybe we never see Desmond Ridder this season. And, you know, that's okay too. Because to Stoddard's point of you don't want to just kind of baptize him by fire. You don't want to just throw him to the wolves in his first year. If he is not ready, don't play him. Simple as that. You don't want to do that to him. You don't want to knock his confidence. If he needs a full season of just adjusting, learning under a veteran of Marcus Mariota, someone who has been in the league for a while. I know he's not the best example of how a professional quarterback should be playing, but he at least can show him the ropes and whatnot. So he's in a good situation regardless. And if you have to wait till next year to kind of see Desmond Ridder, that's okay, you know, or just whatever happens. What I was saying earlier is it ain't going to come from this year's draft, in my opinion. That's for sure.
Well, it could come from Lamar Jackson ended up here in Atlanta. And I know that keeps getting thrown out. Listen, that's not a Dan prescribed narrative. Okay. I'm just saying
a possibility. It is a possibility.
It's out there. Yeah. It's out there. It's prevalent. It checks a lot of boxes. If you're an Atlanta fan and you know the inner workings of how the Falcons do their business, Lamar Jackson checks a lot of those boxes. So,
I
but
kind of
to
feel like
your
this
point,
comment's true. I think that I honestly at this point that's kind of how I feel about this.
I think that's fair, and I understand it. But if the Falcons really are not entertaining that idea of getting Lamar, right, or somebody else, I mean, I'm sure there's other free agent quarterbacks too, but if that's not what they're trying to do, I'm interested in how that plays out. And I do know that there's a comfortability factor with Arthur Smith and Marcus Mariota. He's comfortable with them. Again, we're not at practice. We don't get to see what's going on. Maybe Ridder is terrible in practice. I don't know.
That's what we don't know.
No, we don't know. And then the one thing that we do know is that Marcus Mariota is leaving points on the field. He's not completing passes that he should. But then again, we brought him in for what is $1 million. I think he's playing for $1 million or something like it's
I
like
think, yeah, it's super low. It's low money, and we get him for next year as well.
It's NFL backup money. I mean, like there are NFL backups that make a lot more money than he does. So
yeah, I mean,
we're not
big
really
credit to the Falcons staff for being able to handle this crap show of a cap space that they were giving to when they came in, like Terry Fontenot and them. That's a heck of a job by them, because what Rude's is saying in the comments right now about how Atlanta was in cap hell because of Matt Ryan's contract, because of Julio Jones's contract, and some other players that you paid some big money to. I mean, it was horrible. Like, especially 1 or 2 years ago, like if you looked at Atlanta's salary, it was like you literally had no wiggle room whatsoever. And that's why you had to sign a Marcus Mariota for like $1 million. And that's why you had to kind of go to him, which isn't a bad thing. It's giving you some freedom now to where next free agent season, when maybe you are just a couple draft picks away and maybe 1 or 2 free agency signings away from really being a legitimate contender, you have this freedom to go spend that money on maybe a Lamar Jackson or another big time player at another defensive or offensive position that you feel
when all that cap space frees up next season, by the way, like the dead cap space. Yeah, the dead cap space that we got for Matt Ryan, it's gone by next year.
Okay, so you can 2 years, $18 million for Mariota. Yeah. I mean, yeah, $9 million a season. Yes, you take that.
Yeah, and I think some of that's backloaded the second season, if I'm not
mistaken.
It's
lower the first year. I do think it's a lower number than $9 million for the first year. I don't know how the structure is off the top of my head, but I remember seeing it being lower than $9 million for the first year for him. But speaking of quarterbacks that are not necessarily performing extremely high level, Aaron Rodgers, a really bad day for him again today. They've lost to Detroit. Detroit's got 2 wins on the season now, and they are struggling. I know they had a good offense earlier on in the year. We talked about that before, but their offense has cooled down. They're not scoring a lot of points. They won 15-9. Aaron Rodgers, once again, won back-to-back MVPs the past 2 seasons, and then this year, every single time we come on here and talk, and like he just is having rough days. Yeah, he threw for 291 yards. A lot of that came later in the game. He started to move the ball, but he threw 3 interceptions in the end zone, 2 of which where they were within like the 5-yard line, I think, and then the third one they were a little bit further down, but still he threw
Rodgers
it into the end
never
zone.
Turns the ball over. Never.
No, they were talking about this today. I heard it today. It was like against a division opponent, I think he's never thrown more than like 1 interception.
Dude, and he had a streak where at Lambeau Field he went like, I want to say like 17 weeks in a row at Lambeau Field without throwing an interception. Something
he did
like that.
That was a few years ago. He did do that, and then he hasn't thrown 3 interceptions in a game in 5 years. So this was the worst performance on that side of things as he has had in a very, very long time.
Part of that you have to factor in is early in that football game, he was throwing dots and just hitting people in the chest, and they were dropping passes. And that has been a situation that has reared its head multiple times this year for the Packers, where Aaron Rodgers
Different Aaron.
was – yeah, good for Aaron Murray. Aaron Rodgers has been dropping dimes on these guys, and they keep dropping the football. And then he gets frustrated. And I think one of the issues that we have always seen with Aaron Rodgers is, unlike some people, he doesn't play well when he's mad. When he gets angry, he doesn't play better. And so he starts getting pissed off, and he starts trying to force balls into spots that he can't do anymore. I mean, he's in his 40s now, right? Isn't he like 41?
I want to say so.
Know.
I'm sure somebody can correct me, but I think he's in his 40s now, and he just can't do the things that he used to do. Tom Brady at 44, 45 years old can still make the throws, but his game was never predicated on throwing lasers and throwing the deep ball. Aaron Rodgers was. There was one of the balls that was incomplete was down the sideline, and his guy didn't make the catch for him, but he underthrew him. Right? When's the last time you saw Aaron Rodgers underthrowing guys on a go route? I mean, Aaron Rodgers always would put that out there. If anything else, he would overthrow him. But in all, Aaron Rodgers has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL that we've ever seen, and I think it's just we're at the point where it's almost over. But
man,
in totality, it was a bad day for quarterbacks in general. Justin Herbert didn't have a good game in that Falcons game. My guy Josh Allen did not light the world on fire in his football game.
What's going on with the Bills, by the way? Oh my God.
Bills Mafia, where are you at?
Like that, I think that's it's definitely time to talk about the Bills a little bit. Let's talk about a team that has fallen off this year. They are, I don't even know what to say is going on. They lost to the Jets 20-17 today. Like, and Josh Allen was throwing interceptions, 205 yards passing. He has really, really started to slow down this year. Like a lot of teams last year that were really good don't look good this year. The Bills don't look good this year. Tampa Bay does not look good this year. The Rams look awful this year. Like what is going on with these teams, man? I don't know what to tell you. It's bad.
Well, the Bills have looked good in the majority of their games, but they've had two real clunkers, right? So I can excuse that. But to your point, the Rams are terrible. Like, how in the heck are you a Super Bowl winning team and you come back the next year? And like, we know a lot of times after winning a Super Bowl, you got a lot of guys on 1-year deals. You kind of loaded up for that 1 year run. Right?
Von Miller.
Oh yeah, OBJ, Von Miller. I got you. Like,
they really did build up that team last year. Yeah.
But the amount of turnover wasn't massive. I mean, look, you can explain away what's happening in Tampa. They had 3 offensive linemen, 2 of them Pro Bowlers, and Gronk all leave that offense in 1 year. That's Ali Marpet was one of the best guards in the NFL, and he walked away. I mean, that is a lot to replace on the. It's hard to win at a consistent level if you lose the offensive line, and I'm not that up to date on the Rams personnel, and maybe that's what the case is. But man, the Rams look terrible.
I think what's going on in the NFL more than anything, going back to bad quarterback play, the NFL's tired of hearing about these old quarterbacks, man. They are ready to kick them out of the league and just put all the concentration on this next generation of the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens and whatnot, because run down the list. Tom Brady not having too great of a year. He did, however, hit the 100,000-yard mark today, so kudos to him. It took him a long time to do it, but gosh, first time in NFL history to do that, first player to ever do that. That's still a heck of a milestone. Accolades keep piling up for him, but still, yeah. Tampa Bay has not been having a good year. We just hit on Aaron Rodgers. Boy, they haven't had a good year. I knew Green Bay wasn't going to have a good season from the very first play of their season. When I was watching them play, I believe it was Minnesota in week 1. They threw a go route to one of their rookie wide receivers. We'll call him Joe Smith. And he puts it right in his egg basket, man, in his bread basket, and it goes right through his hands, right through Joe Smith's hands, man. I knew from that, and Aaron Rodgers, he just had that look on his face like, holy crap, this season is about to be hell. I'm not about to have fun. And I knew from that moment on, Green Bay was not about to have a good season. And then you go over to Matt Ryan, Indianapolis, leaves Atlanta, goes to Indianapolis. Things are looking up in Indianapolis. You got Jonathan Taylor at running back. You got some pretty good weapons on offense, a defense that might actually be good, and a really good offensive line, or is typically a good offensive line. He gets benched. Done. Already cut from the list. Matt Ryan is done. These old quarterbacks are not faring well this year, and man, it might be the end of a generation after this season. It has been bad for those 3.
Well, when you go and take a wide receiver from North Dakota State in the 2nd round, and that is Christian Watson, and he drops, that is not the way that you want to welcome yourself to the NFL. Hey, but you know what? It did make sense going to get a North Dakota guy because he could play in the Colts. Oh, wait, they play in a dome. Never mind.
Yeah, maybe not so much there. But speaking of Matt Ryan, too, because, he got benched for Sam Ehlinger to come out there. Sam Ehlinger with a whopping 103 yards passing and 1 interception today against New England, and they lost 26-3. So I see that they've decided there. But, if you're talking about the Colts, right, did you just decide to go to the younger guy because, you think he's your future? Because who in the world thinks that Sam Ehlinger is your future at quarterback in the NFL? That's not the case.
And that's who we're rocking with, man. Pass.
you're not building your franchise
pass.
around him. You're not. So to bench Matt Ryan for that and to see him obviously still performing like that, because none of us were fans of Sam Ehlinger in college. He had a very different type of style that he played with that didn't translate over so far. And I don't think it's going to translate over for him specifically. Other guys can run that style in the NFL. It just doesn't seem to be working for him. But I think it's more or less that like the Colts just have a bad team. And so you take a guy like Matt Ryan, right? And then you bench him. It's kind of disrespectful when your team overall like is the problem. It's not him. It's not Matt Ryan's not your issue over there clearly because he's not starting anymore and you're scoring 3 points. And to me, it just doesn't make sense. That move doesn't make sense because once again, you're not building your lineup and your roster around Sam Ehlinger. You're not long term into that, and you and I both know that, or all of us know that, and they know that.
Well, and the biggest issue is that offensive line was regarded as one of the best in the league for the last couple of years. They're not producing. They had one of the best run games in the NFL with Jonathan Taylor. They're not producing. So I don't know exactly what the problem is, but Matt Ryan wasn't the problem. The problem is you can't block anybody. You got your quarterback sacked 9 times today. That's right. 9 times. You didn't run the ball for crap. And that is, like I said earlier in the show, is that we're going to bring that up again. The Rams are on pace to set the NFL's all-time record for the fewest rushing yards in a season. They're averaging less than 67 yards a game right now as a team. Not one guy. As a team, they're averaging 67 yards a game. And that is going to be dead last in NFL history, surpassing the Detroit Lions from like 1960 something. I mean, like, come on. Like, bro, we are flirting with historical ineptitude running the football. But then they said on the same broadcast that the Bucks are right there. They're like they're doing just as bad as well.
Tampa had a whopping 51 rushing yards today, by the way, and the Rams had 68. So both of them great performances.
So I wonder if that has to do with, like, do you guys just think it purely has to do with poor O-line play? Or do you think it maybe has to do with the fact that defensive lines and defensive players specifically are just getting a lot more talented? Like, these are some freak athletes we're putting out there on the field now. You know, like, we're talking like just in this latest draft class alone, you had Travon Walker, you had Jordan Davis, and you had some other freaky dudes out there in that defensive line class. Like that, like we're talking guys that are 6'4", long arms, could touch their knees standing up. I mean, just absolute freaks built in a lab. So do you think it's honestly that these offensive lines are just bad, or are just defensive players getting better because they're a lot more physical, they're a lot more athletic than they have been in the past? Like, you don't just have these big dudes eating space anymore. You have guys that can run, they can cover, they can do anything and everything that you would want them to. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm thinking is like maybe it's just that these defensive line players are getting a lot better.
Well, and there's a handful of backs that can still carry the ball. Nick Chubb has got 841 yards. These are all the stats coming into today. 841 for him. Saquon's got 779. Derrick Henry at 755. And then you got Josh Jacobs at 743 because remember, he had that really massive game. But then after that, it kind of falls off. You're in the low 600s. Dalvin Cook is in there. And some backs that just kind of get spared. But you're right. I think more than anything, Jonathan, to answer your question, it's a coaching philosophy, right? We have moved away from running the football as a primary way to move the football up and down the field. Is throw. And they work on it so much that I don't think they spend a whole lot of time working on the run game. And I don't think it's a big focus in practice. I don't think it's a focus with the team. I think with the Browns, I think running the football is a major focus with that team. And I think that's why they do it successsuly. Derrick Henry runs well because he's freaking Derrick Henry. Okay.
Well, and Derrick Henry they do have some place for a team that they can't throw the ball very well. So they've designed their, like you're saying, schematically, they designed a game around running the football over there in Tennessee. They for sure have.
So I unfortunately, I love the aerial game where, you put points on the board, but even a guy who would love to throw it all the dang time, know that you have to be able to run the ball successfully to win football games. And the ineptitude that these teams are showing week in and week out running the ball. I mean, think about when Cordell Patterson was running the ball so well for the Falcons. I mean, that was like all the news was like, oh my gosh, the Falcons are running the ball. Can you believe it? The Falcons are running the ball. It was like, what? Okay, we ran the ball. Big freaking deal. Like, you're supposed to be able to run the football. but it's just not a part of the game anymore.
And we kind of talked about this a little bit ago as well, kind of like the Falcons not having the best run game in the world, or I think the issue was this week they actually kind of got away from the run game when they should have kept running it this week because it was working for them. It honestly, the run game was there. Tyler Algier, I think that's how you say his name, Algier. He had 99 yards on 10 carries as well. And then Patterson was getting eased back in or, a little bit slower to start. So he wasn't having a 130, 140 yard game like he had earlier in the season. But as a team, 201 yards rushing was a good rushing performance. That's a top tier rushing performance. And that's the kind of stuff to answer your question, Jonathan, using stuff like that, you can easily still run the football in the NFL overall. I think those teams just have gotten away from it. And they have guys like Rashad White running the ball for Tampa, and then was it Darrell Henderson, I think, for the Rams. Like they don't really have a great running back either. I think that's the biggest issue on these teams is look at who's running the ball. They're not these insane running backs that you're seeing other places being able to have success. So I think it is partly on those offensive lines too, though. I do think it is partly there.
So, maybe this all has to do kind of with how the running back classes in the past years have been. Because, all the great running teams that we just listed off, you said Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, those type of dudes. Running backs that are just dudes by themselves. Who gives a crap who you put in front of them? Those guys are going to be great. They're going to find a way. So maybe it just has to do with who's being drafted and who's available in these last running back classes. I talk about all the time how Georgia fans were spoiled to be given Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, and DeAndre Swift in consecutive years, guys. Consecutive years. That does not happen. That is not normal. There's 3 legit NFL dudes in that statement that we just listed. One pretty much retired already, but was offensive player of the year, MVP type guy, and now you got Nick Chubb and DeAndre Swift as well. So does it maybe just have to do with who's been available in these draft classes? Like maybe running backs haven't been just built that way anymore. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing right here.
Well, also keep in mind that the shelf life with the running backs. Okay, think about so you just listed off those running backs, right? You didn't mention Zamir White. Zamir White was supposed to be better than all of them. He was the highest rated running back to ever come out of high school, ahead of Adrian Peterson. So he tears his ACL in the playoff game in high school. Then he tears it again at Georgia. He gets it repaired. He had a really good senior season. But obviously he's not the same player that he was. He's not getting carries with Vegas.
He's not getting much carries, but he is still behind Josh Jacobs there. So that's
there is a legitimate reason why he's not. It's not because he's terrible, right? But you would have thought at this point of the season he would have elevated himself to number 2 and gotten maybe 8 to 10 carries a game.
Yeah,
behind
he only
Josh
had
Jacobs.
1 carry today, so that's a fair point.
For negative yards, which
negative 1 yard.
And somebody will correct me if I'm wrong because that's what we do here, and we appreciate that. We don't hate on that. But wasn't the stat last year that he did not have a negative rushing yard all year? They never had a negative rush the entire season.
I don't know, but
I don't know. But I know that he was on pace closing in on a 1,000-yard season. The past 2 seasons at Georgia, like the last 2 seasons at Georgia, he was running the ball a lot more than people realized it and gaining a lot of yards on that part. Yeah. So, but I think this is my 2 things on the running back part of everything goes. One, in college, like the good running backs, the really good running backs, it comes down to that shelf life. They're getting run into the ground at some of these places, man. Like the guys like that, like they don't have that much long-term production in the NFL because they come in there like Jonathan Taylor's of the world. Like he's dealing with a lot of crap right now, injuries constantly because he got ran into the ground. We talked about that a few weeks ago as well. So that's a big thing in my opinion. And the other thing is when you've got these new guys coming out that aren't, like maybe 1 or 2 draft classes aren't quite the same as what you've had previously, all of a sudden, you're going to have a year or 2 in there that's going to have you're going to see that because running backs getting to that second contract, that big contract, very few of them because you can usually go get a young guy that can do the same job for a lot cheaper than signing somebody for $50-60 million over 4 years or something like that. And that's what they've started to learn. I think that's the combination as far as like the running backs and long-term production in the NFL.
And if you look at this next batch that's coming out, there's not really anybody that grabs your eye. Zach put it in here. Bijan Robinson, obviously, he's a back that I think people have their eye on.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
Jahmyr
Gibbs will definitely be up there. Yeah.
And Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be an interesting one for me because I think he's carried this Alabama team this year, and I think he's
He carried
probably a
Georgia
little
Tech,
pissed
and he's
off.
doing it again with Bama.
Yeah, I mean, I think when he went to Bama, he didn't think that he was going to have to carry the entire team by himself, and he pretty much is. And they're running him pretty heavy at Alabama, so that might affect his long term. But there's not really. If you think of all the backs that are coming out, there's not anybody that really catches your eye. I mean, look at the Georgia backs that we have right now. Right? Is there any one of them that you would tab NFL superstar right now? I don't know that we have one. I mean, maybe Robinson ends up being that guy. I think Dejon has a career. I think Kenny has a career. Kendall, we don't know. We just don't know. And
He's
maybe
he hasn't been able to
he's
show
always
us.
hurt.
Yeah, he hasn't been able to show us. I think Kendall can be good. I haven't lost
Yeah,
faith
of
in that
course,
part
it
of him
could
being
be.
good. He just is
like
hurt,
a
and so
kid
you can't do
can.
anything. Your best ability is your availability, and he hasn't been available, and that's unfortunate because I think he was a stud running back. I think so.
I mean, I feel like Dejon Edwards is going to be one of those guys. He's putting together a really good year for Georgia. I think he's going to be one of these guys that ends up being a mid-round draft pick, and people are going to be like, holy crap, where did this guy come from? Nobody was putting him on their running back boards, and he's just running around free on the NFL, putting up averaging 95 yards a game. I think that's the type of guy that Dejon Edwards is because he's been that at Georgia. I think people kind of tapped him that early on because they were seeing what he did in mop-up duty, and now this year he's actually producing. But that's just Georgia fans. That's like that collection. We're not talking about the entire nation is talking about Dejon Edwards. So I think he has potential to be that dude in the draft class that he ends up in.
Yeah, I think so for sure. But we'll see how the running back stuff plays out in the next couple of years, and maybe we'll see some new guys step up and make big performances and big names for themselves early on in their career. So we'll see how that goes. One more game that I want to talk about before we get into the picks for the evening and wrap everything up before Sunday Night Football kicks off. Vikings versus the Commanders. 20-17. Vikings pull that win out late in that game. It was a close one down to the wire. Going back and forth. Tyler Heineke, he can't buy him some new Jordans this week because he did not quite earn that right. But I wanted to talk about the Vikings specifically. The Vikings are quietly 7-1. 7-1.
We talked about them last week too.
We did, but they were continuously climbing up. And right now, going back to what we just said about Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay and stuff, he now or Kirk Cousins and the Vikings now have a 4-game division lead. 4 games. Wow.
Well,
that's why I wanted to talk about this team today because they are already about to punch a playoff ticket.
I get it. They've been really good. The Vikings have been. And I'll tell you why they're a quiet 7-1. It's because the Philadelphia Eagles have been the talk of the entire league because they're undefeated right now. So that's, of course, what everybody's going to focus on. And also you have to think who's in that division with Minnesota? Green Bay, who we already said is struggling. The Chicago Bears, who are also struggling a lot. And then Detroit, right? That's the other team in that division.
Detroit, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 3 teams that are are struggling a lot this year, but good on Minnesota. We talk about like, you just gotta find a way in the NFL. You gotta find a way to win. They don't necessarily have to look pretty, but you just have to find a way to win games and be in that spot to where you can make the playoffs. Because who knows what happens in the NFL playoffs? You never know what could shake out during that 4 or 5 week span. And so Minnesota's putting themselves in a good spot. They're capitalizing on a weak division. And yeah, they're quiet 7-1, and people aren't really talking about them much. And also has to do with they're not exactly very flashy. They got a Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, but other than that, they're not like one of these flashy teams
and
that
Kirk
everybody
Cousins
wants
isn't
to
the talk
on.
of the town at quarterback anymore. After he got traded at the couple seasons there, everyone kind of cooled down on him a little bit. But on this point, though, we talked about who the division they've been in and where they've been playing. Their next stretch of games is going to be what proves whether or not they're a real contender or not. Because listen to the next couple of games they have. They have the Bills on the road. Then they get the Cowboys at home. Then they get the Patriots behind that at home again. And then they are at home once again against the Jets. And the Jets are surprisingly 6-3 this year. So they're actually – the next few games are going to be a challenge for them. And we'll see what they can actually do. I'm
just thinking of that video right now of you got to F around and you find out. That's exactly what I just thought of. That's what the Vikings about to do.
We talked about Kirk Cousins last week about how it was kind of laughed at that the Vikings picked him the Redskins moved on from him in favor of Robert Griffin III. And we said all that last week. So that's rehashing old stuff, but he is consistent. He's, He's 265 today, which nobody. You can't roll your eyes at 265. That's still a pretty good day. And takes care of the football, gets it where it needs to be. They have done a really good job. One of the things that when you're not paying your quarterback ridiculous money, and they are paying him very well. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he's making chump change. He's making good money, but he's not making that max quarterback money that you talk about with some of these other guys. So it allows them to surround him with weapons in offensive line and defensive line. And then the other thing too is that a lot of these guys they've hit on in the draft, right? And we've talked about that forever and ever. Amen. Is that if you draft well, if you hit on your draft picks, that's how you're successful. When the Falcons made that Super Bowl run, it wasn't because we went out and got a bunch of free agents. It's just we hit on like 2 or 3 classes in a row. And Thomas Dimitroff did get credit for that, and that ended up keeping the job for much longer than he should have because he actually did hit on 3 consecutive drafts that led us to a Super Bowl. And I've never understood why some GMs can have a run where they can't do anything wrong, and then they can't do anything right. It's like they didn't get stupid. But like with Thomas Dimitroff, I always felt like he had to be the smartest guy in the room, right? He had to get creative. He wouldn't just take the layup. He wanted to take the half court 3, right? It's like, dude, just take the freaking layup sometimes.
Insert Tack McKinley.
Yeah, right. So, but I think one of the reasons that the Vikings are extremely successful is because they're on that run of hitting in the draft, doing a really good job of controlling their cap and having money to go get people. But it's a team to watch, and you're absolutely right, Jeremiah. This next window of games will definitely write the tail of their season.
Absolutely. And so let's go ahead and jump straight into our picks for the night so we can get ready for that. It's 8:17. That game starts in a few minutes. So tonight's game is Tennessee on the road at Kansas City, -14. So we'll do what we did on the last one. Are they going to cover the Kansas City's winning the game? Do they cover the spread at 14 points or not? Dan.
So I have not been as impressed with Kansas City as I have been in years past, and Kansas City for whatever reason has always kind of been my side chick, right? My team on the side that I always secretly liked and liked watching, and this is even before. I think it goes all the way back to Joe Montana whenever he got traded there, and that's probably why I started watching Kansas City Chiefs games. So I do like them, and I will be rooting for them to win the football game tonight. But I don't. They have not been lighting the world on fire, so I don't know if they're going to cover that number. So I'm going to say no, but I'm wrong on everything. So,
Jonathan, how we feeling?
I don't know that we should just be writing off a team with Derrick Henry on the other side. Kansas City's offense is sexy. That thing looks good, and we all love it, and it's eye-popping. But that defense, on the other hand, isn't exactly the same. It ain't on the same level. So, I mean, when you kind of get into that talk, a Tennessee team that can chew the clock a lot. It's kind of like what we said about the Georgia-Tennessee game. Kansas City likes to score points. They want to look flashy. They want to look good on offense. But if you get in a game with a Tennessee team that's able to run the ball with Derrick Henry, they're able to keep the ball out of your hands, and then they get you on a 3-and-out, and they get it right back, and they do the same thing, then it gets hairy pretty quickly. So I'm going to say that I'm in agreement with Dan. I don't think Kansas City covers. I think they do win, but I wouldn't be surprised either if Tennessee pulls it out.
All right, so I am going to go against the grain on that one. I'm going to say they cover. My reason for it being is Ryan Tannehill is still out this week, and so Malik Willis is still running this offense. And if they only let him throw the ball 10 times and Derrick Henry's having to literally run for over 200 yards basically to win this game at that point or to even be competitive at that point. So because of Tannehill not being back, I like Malik Willis for obvious reasons. He's from my alma mater, all that kind of stuff. So I have faith in him long-term being able to put something together. Right now, I don't know that he's necessarily ready. He hasn't looked very great in his time, and I don't think that they are letting him throw the ball a lot with Tannehill out. So with that, I think that you're going to see the Chiefs get a pretty decent win tonight on there. But next game on the docket is a better one to talk about. It's Ravens on the road with the Saints tomorrow night, and Baltimore is -1.5 on that game. Dan, how we feeling?
I'm going Baltimore because I hate the Saints, and I don't really care I don't care how they do it. And I just hate the Saints, so I don't want to see them win. I want Baltimore to win and cover. I think they're going to anyway. I think they're going to win and cover, but I mean, 1.5. It's basically like just win the freaking game.
Just
dude.
win the game. Unless you just win by 1 point. I mean, just win the game. Yeah.
I mean, so Baltimore just got Roquan Smith from the Chicago Bears. That was a big trade pickup for them. They got a linebacker. Good for Roquan because we knew he wanted out of Chicago. He had for a while. It got pretty rough because, was it Robert Quinn when he got traded? There was talk about how Roquan cried and stuff like that. So he wasn't in a good place. So now he's in a good place with Baltimore. He's got a good offense on the other side from him. And also, is Andy Dalton still the quarterback right now for the Saints, right? Yeah. Ain't no way in hell I'm putting my faith in a ginger, brother. Not a chance. Sorry to all my gingers out there, but I ain't doing it. I ain't doing it. I'm riding with Baltimore. I'm riding with Lamar Jackson, and Roquan's going to have a big opening day with Baltimore.
Hopefully he does have a good opening day. I'm excited to see him play for a team that is actually known to have pretty good linebackers in general. So we'll see how he gets to play out in the long term.
The Bears are known for having linebackers.
I know, but
monsters in the midway. Come on.
There are some. He's going to another team with some good linebackers in their history. Okay, I know you're not downplaying some of the linebackers we've seen play with the Ravens, are you?
If you stack up the Ravens linebackers against the Bears linebackers all time,
but there's a recent stretch or more recent stretch in the last 20 years that have been some pretty good linebackers there for him. Yeah, and they're pretty darn good, are they not? Are they not Hall of Famers?
There's 2 of them.
Are they not Hall of Famers? How many Hall of Fame linebackers?
No, they're badasses.
Yeah, how many Hall of Fame linebackers you want them to produce? Jesus. But
the Bears got like 8 or 9, but hey, who's
in the last 20 years?
Urlacher, I guess.
Okay, see, there we go. But anyways, I'm going with Baltimore as well. I think Lamar is going to have a pretty good game. The Saints don't have a great defense in general. Like you said, Andy Dalton at quarterback. And Alvin Kamara has not been the same anymore. I don't know what changed in the past 2 seasons. Prior to the
He's
past
on my
2
football
seasons.
team.
You picked him up, and so that's how we need to know who not to pay attention to. But no, Lamar Jackson. Also, by the way, I didn't even realize this. Y'all know that Lamar Jackson's actually leading his team in rushing yards on the season. Yeah. We knew he ran a lot, but he's actually leading the team in rushing yards.
Well, they can't keep a running back healthy either, so
no, they can't. That's very true for them. But with that being said, that's who I've got on this pick as well. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. That game is about to kick off. It is 8:22. We will catch you guys next week after week 10, and make sure you keep up with us on social media, follow us, everything like that as well. We look forward to seeing you guys next week.